I'm like constantly frustrated by the limitations and the complexity and the bureaucracy, and also fascinated. Like the motivation doesn't seem to go away. I'm like, oh man, that is so annoying. I'm gonna fix that. It's hard to look away. I know too much. I see too much potential for what could be, and I see the areas where things are failing, and I'm like, we can fix that.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the podcast where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place.
Oh, Susie, where are you going now?
My name is Andy DeMeo. This episode was sponsored by and recorded in Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Today, I'm speaking to my friend Alex Freed. Alex is the founder and senior director of Atlas Consulting at PLAN, the Post-Landfill Action Network. PLAN helps colleges work towards a zero-waste present and future. We talk about trash, thrift shopping, repairing your clothes, punk music, planned obsolescence, and a whole bunch of other stuff on this episode of Granite Goodness. Alex Freed, thank you so much for coming on the Granite Goodness podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You are like type 1A for ideal guests, in
Thanks.
my opinion. No, you really are.
Appreciate that.
I mean, every time I talk to you, yeah, I mean, this is why you're great. Like, you eschew compliments like any humble person, but who you are and what you have achieved and the stuff that you're working on, it's no joke, and you're quite serious about it, and you have just the most interesting track record and path that I want to highlight and have people hear your story, because it's a great story about New Hampshire. It's a great story about, problem solving. It's a great story about, every conceivable thing you could want to be motivated by if you want to make the world a better place. So I am psyched that you're here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely intro.
Yeah.
Happy to chat.
Take us back. Originally, my understanding is that what is now PLAN, the Post-Landfill Action Network, got started as a kind of student initiative at the University of New Hampshire, Trash to Treasure or something, right?
Yeah.
What is that? How did that all get started?
So the startup of this was my freshman year. My friends and I were moving into an apartment off campus, and I had friends who were older than me who shared the advice of, in about a week, the streets are going to fill up with stuff. If you need a futon, there's plenty. Like, don't buy anything for your apartment.
Yeah.
And so I drove around with a friend who had a truck, and we collected a few items for our apartment, but it was overwhelming. It was like, for every futon that we found that we wanted, there were 100 more futons, and it was a shocking amount of stuff. And so I spent multiple days. I went back out, and I started to take pictures, and in some cases some video, and really documented as many overflowing trash cans and dumpsters as I possibly could. And I was just kind of personally fascinated by the concept. So I started to do research that summer, looking into what other campuses were doing. This is back in the summer of 2010, and there were a handful of campuses around the country that had move-out programs. We were certainly not the first campus to have a program to collect and do something with the material left behind by students, but many of the programs that existed were funded and structured through a sustainability office. And back in 2010, not many campuses in the U.S. even had sustainability offices.
Right.
And so very few campuses had the infrastructure, the funding, the resources to make a program like that happen. And we decided that we were going to try to build a program where the idea was, if we could raise the money we needed in year one, could the revenue from the sale cover the cost of year two? And could it funnel into a self-sustaining program?
Yeah.
So my sophomore year, we raised a total of $10,000. worked through the whole year to get permission for the program. So we got all the permits for the physical space, and we had to negotiate for space for storage, and we had to negotiate for the spaces to be able to set up drop-off locations to direct people to leave stuff and not throw it away. And then we, as a student organization, coordinated this project where we went around and collected in rented trucks all of the stuff that students discarded at the end of the year, at the end of my sophomore year, stored everything over the summer in rented containers and places where we could store stuff, and then brought everything back out during move-in weekend and held a yard sale during move-in weekend. And the revenue from that sale was somewhere in the range of $12,000, and it was the first program in the country that was run entirely by students and self-sustaining.
Wow.
And so the second year of that program, which was my senior year, so the first yard sale was the beginning of my junior year. The second yard sale was the beginning of my senior year. The second yard sale, the revenues were around $20,000. And so during my senior year, we had 2 years under our belt. We, just through connections in the climate movement, we had friends who went to other campuses who were also doing divestment work or who were doing other sort of student, sustainability initiatives. There were conferences that we attended where we got to meet other people from other campuses around the country. We slowly built out a network of students who were very interested in the story of UNH Trash or Treasure.
Yeah. And
during my senior year, I was on, show my age, I was on Skype calls.
I love it. Listen, I was there too.
Because Zoom wasn't a thing yet,
right.
And everyone used Skype. So I was on Skype calls with students at Northeastern University and at UMass Amherst, and we were walking through how would they set up these programs, what are the logistics and the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And what we found when talking to those students was many of the same questions we faced were questions they faced, and it was a lot of things that are hard for a student to answer. So questions of insurance for renting large spaces, questions of liability, questions of how to follow permit processes and how to follow fire code for a you're setting up a yard sale that is essentially the equivalent of the size of a pop-up Walmart.
Right.
And it's students who are running it, right? And so what are all of the things you need to know about financial management, safety management, rental of trucks, fire code, insurance, etc. So we set up a guide basically. And so my senior year, we sort of soft launched a few programs on other campuses. We started to write business plan ideas and applications. We submitted for example, the New Hampshire Small Business Development, the New Hampshire Social Venture Innovation Challenge, the SVIC.
Right.
So it was the first year of the SVIC at UNH, and so we won first place in that challenge. And that it's just things like that built on themselves until
right.
eventually we had funding and sort of had play tested the idea enough to launch a nonprofit, which we called Plan, which is a post-landfill action network. And so then that first year of Plan's existence, we had 2 full-time staff, and we had 9 campuses from Florida to New Hampshire that launched the T2T model. And so that was our first year, was just experimenting with move-out programs. The work has gone much larger and more complex since then, but that was that was my time in college and the first year after college.
Right.
Yeah.
But how many campuses would you say that you touch?
Yeah, so
right
we
now?
just celebrated our 10th anniversary, and so we've done a bunch of numbers calculations to speak to what our impact has been in 10 years. So over the last 10 years, we have worked with over 1,000 universities in the US and Canada. Some very deep, some campuses who we still work with today, we work with every single year. We've had long-lasting relationships. Some, it's students who came to a couple conferences or have been involved in, they've attended workshops and webinars and things like that.
Wow.
In total, we've directly engaged over 50,000 students.
Oh my gosh.
Those are our numbers right now.
Or even, 1,000 universities, even if you were to try and take the proportion, I would wager that's a substantial
Yeah, in the
amount.
U.S., there are around 3,500 campus-based colleges.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of colleges in the U.S., but
I mean,
a lot of them are very small.
Right.
They're, community colleges, etc.
That's extraordinary. or even to think about what percentage of college students, period, have interacted with or attended an institution that has touched plan in some way. That would be not like 50,000 direct engagements is extraordinary, and 1,000 universities is extraordinary. But I think just to hit these numbers right off the bat, and I mean, when you say that, how does that feel to you? Like the kid who started this when he was 19 and junior year, whatever. Like, does that feel real?
Yeah, yes and no. Like, I think I've lived through it, so I've had the fortune. I feel very fortunate that I've been able to do a lot of direct on the ground work. I've crisscrossed the country a couple dozen times, visiting campuses and doing events and things like that. So I feel like the numbers feel real, but like at the same time, there's also, it's not. I'm like, I love what we do. I'm proud of what we've done, and also there's still so much to do.
Yeah.
And so I waffle back and forth between sort of taking the minute to take a step back and be proud, and also just like overly focused, hyper focused, let's say, on problem solving.
Right.
Yeah.
What was originally in the scope of, call it the first iteration of, hey, we're going to incorporate as a nonprofit and we're going to try and offer this service. And maybe it was like one thing, let's reduce waste. And maybe that's like the mission, but how has that changed and morphed and, iterated over time? Can you talk to me about some of that?
Yeah. So the mission is to empower student leaders, both from a perspective of education and also providing tools and resources to make it so that they can play a leadership role in the waste reduction efforts on their campuses. And so I think we've remained very true to that mission. I think that's something that I'm like very proud of with us, is that we've done a lot of work around our mission, our strategic plan, our evaluation of our own programs, and sort of the evolution of our work. In that, I think that core focus has been really clear the whole time. Yeah. So the first few years, we started with these move-out programs. Even when we were focusing on move-out, like our initial documents, if you look back at like our founding, we still talked about student leadership, zero waste. It was always sort of that umbrella that we saw this being sort of the first pillar of. And so we started to expand into other, say, pillars. So we started, a lot of it was very organic. It was like, we would visit campuses. We would do like we did a lot of road trips. We still do a lot of road trips. We would just pick a handful of campuses that we're working with closely. We would schedule days in between where we didn't have anything to do, and we would either take a day off and go explore a national park, or we would find a campus that's near where we are. There's literally in this country a campus around every corner, and we would use our network and our connections to reach out and to try to build relationships with a new campus, and we would go get lunch or we'd go tour a facility or whatever.
Right.
And so a lot of that experience led to sort of a natural evolution of questions. So we're working with a campus on a move-out program, and they have questions for us about composting. And very, very different program, but we just came from a campus where part of our tour of that campus was their compost facility. And so not only are we like, you should talk to Joe at Ohio University, like that guy knows what he's talking about. Like, it's not just those moments, but it's also our realization that there is this huge lack of sharing of resources and knowledge, even in the sustainability on college campus space. So, our name includes the word network. There's a lot of opportunity for us to aggregate best practices and toolkits and case studies, and then use our sort of umbrella knowledge to focus on advising. So to make a long story short, we grew from just advising on move out to advising on a portfolio of about 20 different types of programs.
Wow.
So procurement policy, like environmentally friendly purchasing policies, composting, reusable to-go programs, surplus property programs, hard to recycle material, et cetera. There's like a whole bunch of different types of programs that we advise on. We do a lot of leadership training. So we do a lot of like students who are super passionate, who started something, are now graduating. And so we're investing in making sure that they understand how to invest in their next leader, how to turn over relationships and information. So we do a lot of like, what does it look like for the person who's in leadership to step back and provide support and training? What does it look like for the person who is about to step into the role to step up? And how do you empower that person? And then for me, like where my work has really shifted is I personally am deeply passionate about systems thinking and really trying to get at this sort of like the root question of why are we at almost 2025 and we do not have any model examples of a zero waste institution when like fundamentally on paper most of us could probably draw. If I handed you a piece of paper and I was like, how would the building we're in be zero waste? Or
Right.
how would, the school, how would your high school be zero waste? Or how could even a college campus be zero waste? Like you could map out the sort of things that would be needed to make it zero waste. Like what did it take to eliminate disposables? Well, we would need reusable dishes. Like what would it take to handle food waste? Well, we would need compost, right? But like the problem on college campuses is super complex. And I have spent the last like 6+ years basically studying and trying to uncover why is it complex and what's the challenge. Like, so I have a lot more to say about that. Like that has been sort of my focus for the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
Plan has grown in a variety of ways. We've increased our services, our programs, our advising. We've hosted national conferences with 500 attendees. We used to do tours around the country with major partners like Guayaquil and Patagonia. We've done some really cool projects. Me personally right now, I am like laser focused on how do we make systems zero waste and how do we like overcome the hurdle or the challenge of large scale institutions dragging their feet towards like actual system level change.
Yeah. I'm going to make a comment that may make you want to blow your brains out, but I still remember, and this is way more complex than how I'm going to frame this issue, but the day in 7th grade, I think, or 6th grade, when they first taught us in science class what happens to our waste and our trash, I swear to God, they put up a little chart in front of the whole class and they said, all right, everyone, these are the things that are available for like what happens when you get rid of, when you throw something in garbage. We can bury it in a landfill. And my friend raised his hand and he was like, what do you mean? The teacher was like, oh, well, we basically just dig a big hole in the ground and put all the trash in there.
Yeah.
And we try and make it safe with cement and all these things. But, there's always leaching and there's all these horror stories with landfills, right? And like, that just doesn't seem ideal. And then he was like, okay, we can incinerate it. And like, that's marginally better. Still pollutes a fair amount. Okay. We could not do anything with it, throw it just totally on the ground or whatever. And then there's this other option that's new and very expensive called plasma arc gasification, where they have like some kind of laser beam that's so hot you can basically throw anything into it and it's gone. Mm-hmm. There's no waste, but the waste product is like a grain of rice or something. And I know that we don't live in the truly energy abundant world yet, but like I'm aware it's possible in theory. And ever since then, I'm just like, why don't we plasma arc gasify all of our trash? Like, why is that not a priority? So anyway, I'm just a layperson who doesn't really know any about any of this stuff, but like, I still remember that was my first like childlike inclination of like, wait, you're telling me we have the technology and, not that that's even I mean, that maybe that's over engineering a thing that, to you is, we could solve this with better systems. We don't need a $10 billion gasification plant in every county, right? But probably wouldn't hurt if there was one. But I can't not think of this issue through that lens. That's my personal.
I don't know enough about that. Actually, I'm not sure. I have a decent sense of the various solutions that are out there. I've never heard of that one. I'm not sure exactly what that is.
It sounds really expensive.
There's in the world. So in the world of people who spend all their time being nerdy about trash and focusing on it all, like it's a pretty small community. There's a lot of folks who work for various nonprofits globally who are all part of like listservs, and we send out articles and we talk about all the stuff that's going on. And there's a common theme in that space, which is sort of umbrella termed as false solutions. And it's not to say that any one solution that has emerged out of the various types of technological solutions is guaranteed to always be false. Like it's not, you can't sort of write it off without sort of, testing it and double checking.
Yeah.
But there's a lot. There's pyrolysis is one. Gasification is another one. I'm not sure which one, if that's what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of concern about the inputs and outputs of systems like that. Like how much energy goes into what you're describing, what happens to the material on the output, what's the emissions of those systems.
Right.
There's another question which is really interesting. This also comes into incineration, which is if we live on a world of finite resources and we are increasingly extracting resources in order to make consumer goods that are often disposable for the purposes of planned obsolescence,
right,
then the more that we then feed those disposable items into a destructive system as
right,
opposed to a system that deconstructs and repurposes material, at what point have we exhausted the resources on planet Earth?
Yeah.
For how long can we sustainably burn the
right,
plastic and the trash that we consume every single day before the lack of reuse, repair, recycle systems that we've pushed off to the side while we favor incineration or burning,
right,
ultimately leads to our long-term demise.
Yeah.
Because we've just gotten rid of all the resources that we needed.
Right.
So there's an interesting arguments behind those things. The other thing is that there's beneficial financial economies around recycling, repurposing, repairing, reusing.
Yeah.
And when we burn stuff, we destroy it.
Right.
And we also destroy the economies around that. So there's
everyone used to mend their clothes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
This was a thing.
Yeah.
My partner is she's a big fan of what she calls visible mending. She'll fix a pair of pants, but instead of trying to make it a fix that's not very visible, she'll do the opposite. She'll fix it with a very bright or noticeable piece of fabric so that it's clear to anyone looking at the pants that, oh, that clearly was mended, right? And it's like trying to advertise, instead of throwing these out and getting new pants, I fixed them. The vision is let's make mending stylish and cool, right?
Yeah, I love that style. That was a big part of what we did when we did the tour with Patagonia. Was we did free repairs of used gear. It was brand blind, so it was you could bring in any product and they would fix it. And they often, their fixes are often very for show. There's a lot of, and they have the skill to hide the repair. But I think there's a lot of intentionality behind being I have this stripe on my jacket that is the wrong color because it's clearly been repaired, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, I think there's no way to avoid the fact that every aspect of consumer, the overall majority of stuff that we buy is sort of has planned obsolescence built into it.
Right.
And that's a relatively new phenomena. 100 years ago, companies that were inventing new technology and making products had no intention at all of making those products have a built-in end of life.
Wow.
And there was a very intentional shift from the 40s to the 60s to build in either functional planned obsolescence or stylistic planned obsolescence into everything we consume. Are you familiar with this? The backstory of the planned obsolescence story?
Not. I mean, even if I am, and I'm not that familiar with it, the listeners may not be.
Yeah.
So tell us about it.
I love this book from the 1950s called The Waste Makers by Vance Packard. Huh. I think it's also funny because I think, if you can sort of transport back to there was the Great Depression in 1929, and so there was a many years period that sort of our grandparents' generation often refer to or are referred to as being people who lived through this, where they grew up in that era of the phrase "use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without," right?
Yeah.
And it was all about salvaging resources as much as you possibly could. Then you funnel into World War II, and during World War II, a lot of government propaganda was around conservation. So, like, recycling was a wartime effort. It was to provide metal to the, like, industrial machine that needed metal in order to make
Right.
things for war.
Right.
And there was also lots of messaging around, like, having, like, a victory garden.
Yeah.
And, like, having chickens in your backyard. And, basically using as few resources as possible at a time when we were trying to conserve as much as we could with this sort of, like, nationalistic background behind it.
Yeah.
Then you have this massive economic boom. So the 1950s is a time period where we all think of as a sort of classic Americana house, white picket fence, 2 cars in the driveway.
Right.
And all of that exploded as a result of people coming home from World War II and starting families and settling into sort of like the dream, quote unquote, of what America looked like. Obviously, that is a dream that was only accessible to white people.
Yeah.
But like there is still that sort of like cultural phenomena
Right.
of like what do people think of when they think of the 1950s
Yeah.
in America? And the book, The Wastemakers, written in 1955, is really an analysis of the peak of this moment. What is the book gets into the sort of background of this, but the idea is that the factories that were sort of taken over to focus on war production were then turned back over for consumption, for building things for consumption, and there was a massive boom in product advancement. A lot of the product advancement also, ironically, had very sexist undertones. So there was a lot of like, appliances for the kitchen in order to make like, the woman's life easier.
Sure.
Like a lot of the marketing and advertising of the 1950s was very like directed at women to make women's lives easier, to use this electric product to make your life easier.
Right.
And so you have the invention of or if not just invention, but like the proliferation of blenders and toaster ovens and microwaves and washer dryer sets and stoves and all these kinds of things that now existed in people's homes that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
The problem was the factories made all of this stuff. They overproduced a high volume of this material, and then people stopped buying it because they bought the one that they needed.
Right.
And so now the companies were like, well, how do we sell more of it?
Yeah.
And so there was a shift in industrial design in the early 1950s to late 1950s. And at the time, the concept of planned obsolescence was seen as a positive. It was seen as like a method of saving the economy.
Yeah.
And it was like talked about positively. So there's like a famous quote from a guy who was seen largely as like an inventor of the concept, who he was talking at a conference and he said, we make good products, we induce people to buy them, then we deliberately make those products old-fashioned, out of date, or obsolete. We do this for the soundest reason, to make money.
Today that sounds insane.
Yeah. But it was like lauded as like the
Right.
solution.
Yeah.
Like this is how we're going to fix things. And so then you have companies, this is like, you can look this up online, watch a YouTube video about it called the light bulb conspiracy.
Uh-huh.
You have like companies like GE and Sylvania and other companies like that, Philips, and they come together and they hire engineers to figure out how to make the light bulbs break faster.
What?
So like the early light bulbs, like they were built in a way where once you screwed them in, they would last for forever, basically.
Wow.
And then they were like, okay, how do we make them thinner with the wire a little bit sort of like less, a little more flimsy? How do we make it so that like people will buy light bulbs once a year, once every couple of years, whatever? And that concept carried on, right? It was like, how do you make the connections inside of the toaster? How do you make the connections inside the mic? How do you make the outer casing more flimsy and less durable? And we've all seen that. Like
Right.
many of us have seen, the 1970s refrigerator in someone's driveway or garage,
Still
whatever,
works.
that's like still works.
Yeah.
Compared to like when I had to buy a fridge for my apartment recently, and it was a 1-year warranty. I was like, really?
That's
like,
not-
it's gonna break on me in a year and a half. I'm gonna have to spend $900 on a new refrigerator.
Yeah, that's garbage.
So I think like we live in a world of planned obsolescence that has been designed that way for a very long time. And if we think about it, our clothes, our cell phones, like everything we touch, everything we interact with the exception of some products, mostly like outdoor gear or certain other sort of like gear style products, most are intentionally designed to break, and that is the sales tactic of the company.
I come at it from the baggage of, I, like you, am motivated by environmentalism, so it's hard to think about it in terms of like, I know that when people throw stuff away in ways that aren't responsible, that there's a cost environmentally, and there's a cost to extracting and producing the stuff in the first place, right? But how you talk about it is as you said, you're a systems thinker, and you say, these were the incentives that these people were under. This is what their goals were. This is what they were trying to do and why they did it.
Yeah.
And it's, you're really trying to get at the truth of why things were set up that way. And, I'm sure that's helpful in designing around how do we fix that, right?
So I think a lot of it does come to design,
Yeah.
right? It's design of product and packaging, right? And there are people much smarter than me in different pockets of this, let's say broader umbrella of a movement. But there's so much happening around whether it's like, how do you design for circularity and reuse? How do you design for compostability, which has been challenged and is questionable. And I'm not defending that, if you're not familiar, like if you go to a coffee shop and you get a cup and it's a compostable cup and
Right.
it says it's compostable, like there's layers of questions behind whether or not that cup actually gets composted.
Yeah.
And really what it comes down to is certain facilities in the United States have set up the infrastructure to be able to properly process compostable disposable products, and other facilities have not. And there's a lot of misinformation, and it's kind of confusing. And a lot of what I do when I work with college campuses is audit that and ensure that they're doing the right thing.
Right.
But like I said, there's a lot of people that have worked really hard on the design components of whether it's reusability or compostability or whatever. To give you an example of like what is not happening but needs to happen and is sort of like 10 years down the road for us for the type of work that we're trying to push for. When we travel around the country visiting campuses, UNH, love them. They don't have one of these.
Uh-huh.
So I'm speaking to examples of other campuses.
Yeah.
There are campuses that have beautifully well-designed surplus property facilities. If you're not familiar with surplus property, it is an umbrella term, often comes from sort of a government space. So typically surplus applies to public universities, although now private universities use the same phrasing, so it's just surplus property. But surplus is basically stuff that is no longer in use by the person or the department that purchased it, that is still has value.
Yeah.
So it is a piece of extra value. It is a surplus value item with no home. It doesn't, maybe the professor retired, maybe the campus went through a renovation, there's a bunch of furniture, there's old electronics, there's lab equipment, there's whatever it is.
I got some surplus stuff.
Yeah, we all have surplus stuff. In a college campus, like
Right.
sometimes I say surplus and people look at me like I have two heads, but what it means is
Yeah.
the sort of discarded material that could still be reusable, right? There are some campuses who handle surplus property in a very ad hoc way. Most of it gets thrown away because no one's looking, and for some ways where people are sort of paying attention, maybe there's like a Craigslist sale or there's like a method of getting rid of it. But there are some campuses who have massive, incredible warehouses where they do a great job managing surplus material. Some of them are starting to get into, so like first of all, that alone is a really amazing thing that we've been doing a lot of studying of. We've traveled, we've visited these facilities, we went to conferences that are focused specifically on surplus property management. We've been analyzing financial records of these programs and trying to understand like sort of the size, scale, scope of them in terms of the size of the campus. But large public universities, Michigan State University, Colorado State University, North Carolina State University, big public universities. I'm not putting numbers to any one campus, but just to sort of say it broadly, many campuses of that size and stature have surplus programs that generate well over $2 million a year in revenue, which is like pretty impressive. It's a dynamic of like really well run management of these facilities.
And where does the revenue come from? Sorry.
Sales. Like they're a functional
I see.
like Goodwill on a college campus.
Okay.
Like, and it's open to the public. And so I've been to these places where like they open the door at 9 a.m. and there's a line of 100 people down the street waiting for them to open the door because it's a bunch of people who are super excited to come pick through whatever got cleaned out of offices and classrooms over the summer during a renovation project or whatever. And it could be refurbished electronics. It could be old lab equipment. It's just stuff that somehow, for some reason, is in surplus on campus. You wouldn't think that there would be that much of a stream of that material. But I've looked at the records. Like, these campuses have consistent annual revenue of that much money. A few of those, many of those programs are like just focused on reuse. A few of those programs are starting to get into things like repair, refurbishment. They might do some cool upholstery stuff. They might do some cool slice up a desk and then use the tabletop for something else because the desk isn't really useful anymore, but they could still use the legs or they could still use whatever. So there's some stuff that is happening like that. What I'm interested in is could a facility like that is sort of now the central clearinghouse for all discarded furniture use that space to do material analysis data and trends data, and then basically develop policy for the university for future purchasing. So could you look at the stream of material coming through that facility and say 90% of what we get that's crappy IKEA particle board furniture is non-repairable, non-reusable, and we throw it away, and it costs us this much money to throw it away every year, and then we have to buy new stuff to replace it. And going forward, from the perspective of planned obsolescence, we're going to have a policy that no furniture can be bought that isn't like hardwood durable furniture.
Yeah.
Like it can't be modular IKEA board type stuff. Right. And like I think you can like use like the data from a facility like that to then come back and say, with the power of purchasing of a university, this university is going to refuse to buy this particular type of material.
Yeah.
That I think is where there's a lot of opportunity for scale. So if you could get, the 3,500 universities in the U.S. that serve like 17 million students annually to all collaboratively agree to no longer buy particle board furniture.
Right.
That would be a huge hit on an unsustainable, product, right? An unsustainable material that is designed to be broken and thrown away.
Yeah.
And just, I think that's like, for me, like one of the things that I'm very interested in is trying to get into these like systems of scale or like systems thinking around how do campuses approach this stuff long term.
The surplus, what's it called? A surplus compound?
Surplus property, like warehouse.
Surplus property warehouse.
Yeah.
That sounds like such a clear win-win.
Yeah, it's amazing.
To a layperson like me, I'm like, well, you're telling me there's a bunch of universities that already are in the habit of, they'll discard something and then it gets cataloged and classified and stored in a place, and then they have a process to resell it efficiently to, a local market of people, and you can make money consistently doing it.
Yeah.
Why doesn't everyone do that?
Yeah, good question. I have that question too.
Yeah.
So here's my understanding of it. That the answer to the question of why are they not doing it, and this gets into like the exact work that I am trying to do right now. So why are they not doing it is my question, right? I think the answer, after like a couple of years of banging my head against the table. I think the answer is that it is a negative byproduct of the way that campuses set up their bureaucracy, because no one is in charge of solving that problem. And the problem is dispersed across 15 different decision makers who each only have control over a tiny percentage of the total decision. So the scenario that we're describing right now is each individual department on a college campus has a budget, and that budget, like, they have to not overspend. They have to bring in the revenue they're expected to bring in and not overspend. It's a little bit different when it comes to, like, academic departments, but there's also plenty of other departments on campus. There's athletics, there's facilities, there's dining, there's so many services. There's the agricultural centers, right? Like, if you just think about, like, our experience at UNH, like, there's like an outrageous number of side departments and side teams that all have physical space and furniture that they have to deal with. And so they might, in that budget, have the ability to replace a desk chair, and there's no written expectation to them for what they're supposed to do with the old desk chair. And for them, it's just kind of a headache. It's like, I have to call, I have to figure out what, like, there's no guidance online, there's nothing on the sustainability website that says, here's what you're supposed to do with a desk chair. It's like, there's no communication around, like, what, so for them, like, they might put in what's called a work order request to facilities, and then for facilities, it's kind of like a headache. It's like, okay, now we have to send out a person to go pick up this desk chair, to go basically bring it downstairs and put it in the dumpster.
Yeah.
And the staff member might then just do the same thing. They might just throw it away. Facilities is often stretched too thin. They are the jack of all trades. They are asked to go deal with every spill and every pipe leak and every emergency at 2 a.m, and they have to set up for major events, and they have to break down after a major event. And they're just like, this is a team that is the most invisible on campus. They are the most stepped on.
Yeah.
Right? These are like the workers who are the most essential, who get treated the worst on campus.
Yeah.
And that team is the only team that we can really look at in most scenarios on campus where they would be the ones responsible for developing the concept of a surplus management system, because they're the umbrella to all of these individual departments. And it is a lot easier for them, in the millions of things that they have to deal with, to just be like, yeah, I'll move your desk chair. Just go, they bring it downstairs and they toss it in the dumpster and they get in the truck and they drive away.
Yeah.
And that is the end of that for them. Versus, like, sitting down with a series of decision makers, campus planning, grounds and event, all of these different things, identifying a physical space on campus, building a proposal for multi-million-dollar build for a warehouse, to create that out of nothing, to propose a project that would require the investment in new jobs, often at a time when most of these departments are, like, struggling to keep their positions.
Right.
It's really, really hard. So, like, there has to be some degree of university leadership. Maybe it comes from sustainability, but there has to be some degree of, like, leadership that brings people together to identify what the gaps are in the system, propose solutions, and then work cross-departmentally to implement those solutions.
Yeah.
And the challenge is there are very few individual champions who have the time, capacity, resources, ability, job mandate that wouldn't be violating something that they're being told by their boss to do. Like, just the idea that someone would be like, yeah, I'll take on the role of creating a surplus warehouse,
right,
like, basically ends there.
Yeah. You talked about justice earlier, right, and equity. Is there a relationship there between, like, that aspect of your work and the fact that, as you said, a lot of facilities people, in a hierarchical sense, they're kind of at the bottom of the rung.
Yeah, totally.
They don't have, a lot of power.
Yeah. So the project that I'm gonna, for me to answer your question, I have to go 5 steps backwards.
This is perfect. Do it.
The project. So, did I go 6 steps backwards? So for many years, I was the executive director, co-executive director of Plan. In 2019, I stepped down from the leadership of the organization, and I took on the role of director of this program that I'm describing, which is called the Atlas Zero Waste Fellowship Program. So that is what has afforded me the 5 or 6 years that I've been describing of being able to like be laser focused on this like problem to solve. Is that I'm not in leadership in the organization anymore, which has been cool and a whole other story.
Yeah.
And so with the Atlas program, it is a 3-stage student fellowship program that gets to the mission, right? We function with college campuses right now in a way that is very similar to the way that consultants work with campuses, where we have outside areas of expertise and a portfolio of resources, and we come in and we give campuses, nice fancy reports based on the stage that they're at. The delivery of that work is done through fellows, which is what makes this whole program unique, because you could sort of describe this program as like a consulting training program. Students are learning how to do consultants, how to do the work of consulting or be consultants.
Yeah.
And so in the first stage, the fellows work with the sustainability team to identify all of the disparate stakeholders across campus. It could be facilities and athletics and grounds and events and dining, but it also could be the director of the art department and labs and like a bunch of other sort of the library, et cetera, like all the places on campus. They identify those stakeholders, they interview them, and we gather very specific questions to the answers that they were asked. Oh my God. Very specific answers to the questions that they were asked, and give the campus a report on their capacity for zero waste. Say all that to get to your question, which is the second stage. We intentionally make it very clear with our campuses that they cannot move into developing an action plan without doing a vision first. And the visioning stage is really crucial for us. So the visioning stage is an opportunity for us to, we teach the fellows facilitation strategy, where the facilitation strategy is around how to create a room full of people, create a space in a room where a very specific conversation can happen that is often really hard to happen under like the current way that things work.
Yeah.
So if we can bring together those workers who struggle with the day-to-day of this work and supervisors, very rarely is there open communication between those folks on campus. And we are not just doing that with a one-to-one, we're doing it in a room of like 20 like staff and supervisors. And we're doing it under the guise of visioning. So the framework of the question we're asking is, if the president of the university convened this meeting and that president sat here and said, I want to make this campus zero waste, I've read your report, I want to fix all the problems that you guys have identified need to be fixed. Here's a blank check. I'm willing to put whatever number you want on this blank check. What do you need to make this program function in a way that puts you out there as leaders in sustainability and also makes it so that none of you in the room have a headache of a program that doesn't work, or not enough staff, or not enough like logistical support or trucks or resources or whatever? Like, what do you need to make this program really, really work?
Right.
And the immediate response that we get is often the folks who are on the staff side have a lot of ideas, and the folks who are in the administrative side become extremely defensive. And then we, as facilitators, have to like navigate the defensiveness.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do get administrators to a place of like really great visioning. Some people are really creative, but it's not uncommon for the first response to be, well, we tried that already and it didn't work. And what we have to do is we have to say, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you telling us about your experience. It sounds frustrating that it didn't work. The purpose of this exercise is to try to get at the idea of what would it look like if it did work. So could you answer what about it didn't work and what would be needed to make it work? So like, let's say, for example, we're talking about composting. And they're like, well, we tried compost collection, but it was really smelly and it attracted, a bunch of fruit flies, and students complained about it. And so we took it away. We got rid of it. Then you're like, all right, well, what if you, instead of collecting it once every 5 days and it built up and it got smelly, you collected it once every day.
Right.
But if you were to collect it once every day, what extra do you need? Do you need extra staffing? Do you need a whole other truck? Like, what would it look like for you to do that and have it be something that it works and you're proud of? And they're like, oh, well, we would need another staff member.
Yeah.
Great. We'll write that down. Right.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to sort of create space for that conversation to happen. I think that's the conversation that's like not happening. I think that's the gap, is that we're not adequately facilitating a conversation between staff, students, and supervisors to be able to identify the true gaps and then figure out what it would look like logistically to fill those gaps in. Because no one on campus is empowered with the role of solving that problem.
Right. Man, I mean, this is so interesting because you begin with what seems like, oh, this is a material problem.
Yeah.
Too much trash is being thrown away or being wasted or not being upcycled, right? But what you've basically explained is that, this is social engineering is the right word, but this is a social dynamics and kind of hierarchical and like organizational structuring problem effectively, right? Of like,
yeah,
the people can understand what they need to get to where they want to go, but we have to get them in the right mindset, in the right place to even have the vision, and then they have to conversation. And it's like, I mean, is that like, this may be obvious, but when you first started focusing just on this issue, right? When you stepped down from leadership and focused completely on Atlas, right? Is this at all what you imagined would be like the roadblock?
No, that's not what I imagined would be the roadblock. Yeah. But I do find it uniquely fascinating. Like, I've definitely said this before, and people think that this is weird, but like, I think the biggest challenge is bureaucracy, and I also find that to be a really exciting challenge.
Yeah.
And most people are like, fuck that. Like, that's, I want nothing to do with that.
Yeah. Well, it's so solvable. It would be one
Yeah.
thing if this is what I love about some of the optimism stuff is like, again and again, I'm learning from you and I have learned from other guests. The challenges that we face and a lot of this stuff, particularly in sustainability, they are not technical in nature, at least not anymore.
Yeah.
Perhaps they never had to be, right, if you want to think from a systems lens, but certainly not on this.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're telling me these people just aren't talking to each other in the right way?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a solvable problem for someone with the right attitude and mindset of I enjoy and having empathy for where people are coming from, getting to know them, building a relationship. And, it sounds silly, like people who I don't think see it from that lens, it's easy to dismiss of say, hey, the step one to actually solving this is really getting to know these people, and down the line, that's actually quite an effective way to diagnose and solve the problem.
Yeah, I one of the trips I did in like 2015, so like for me, like years ago in this work, I was visiting at UC Santa Barbara, and the guy there, he's a young, newly appointed director of facilities, and he got the job through a weird series of circumstances. He'd been working in some degree of like middle management for a while in facilities, and the person above him, I don't remember the details, like maybe passed away or left abruptly or something like that, and so he was like appointed into the position rather quickly, and he was like, one of his tasks was to address concerns that the campus had around the placement, location, number of trash cans around campus. And that is actually like, that issue seems small, but it's something that like comes up a lot in our work. If you remember walking around campus at UNH, you might remember seeing trash cans that like do not look like they belong.
Yeah.
Like there's like the black trash in the blue bin, and then there's like other weird floater bins. Like there's like a gray one with a circle, and you're not sure if it's a recycle bin or compost. Like it's just weirdly there. So it's not uncommon for facilities teams to sort of audit and assess and move around bins. And so he was tasked with this job, and he was like, I'm new to the job. I think I'll be in this position for a while. Like, to get a sort of sense of what's going on, I'm going to get up at 3:30 in the morning and I'm going to join a new person every day on their 4 a.m. shift, and I'm just going to shadow them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to like sit in the golf cart as they go around doing their work, or I'll help them with hauling trash or whatever. But I want to like understand what their challenges are. And it went from a project of like remove and replace 25 trash cans to a project of like remove and replace 500 trash cans.
Right.
And the outcome of it, like he has sent me this report, like the outcome of it was like tens of thousands of dollars in cost savings in just like efficiency management.
Yeah.
Like they're a campus of 25,000 students. He has a huge team of laborers who are going around doing material collection. But like the number of times that they would have to, fumble with a key, unlock someone's office door, go into that office, and then realize that that person had not been on campus that day.
Yeah.
And so the trash can's empty. And then, maybe they have to empty the trash can anyway, just because, the rule is you have to empty it. So they take an empty bag out and they put a new bag in, and the waste of that bag alongside the time that was spent dumping that trash can, alongside, they're moving through a hallway and they really only need 2 bins in the hallway, but there's 20 bins in the hallway, so they have to empty every single bin, the amount of time it takes to empty the bin, the number of bags in the bin, and the cost savings that come from just the efficiency of labor and also the bags, the cost, just the cost of buying those bags.
Right.
And then for him, it's like his goal in efficiency of labor isn't to be like, okay, now we're letting people go.
Right.
His goal in efficiency of labor is well, now we're able to focus on repairing wobbly desks, and we're able to clean bathrooms better, and we're able to deal with some stuff that's going on outside of the buildings, and we're able to do deferred maintenance projects, and there's all these reverberated benefits to efficiencies. So it's getting down to the level of the people doing the work every day is really important.
It would not be hard to imagine somebody else coming into a job like that and not having any interest in, what the people, quote unquote, below them do all the time, and just saying, oh, I don't need to bother with that. I'm above that. I'm the supervisor, et cetera, right? And even the fact that you, as an organization and as a person, have learned about that particular example, and that you've come at it from, again, the lens of sustainability, or even, justice and equity stuff, right? And that you can come out on the tail end and said, we had this really fascinating experience where this guy saved his organization tens of thousands of dollars just by getting to know the people, who worked with him a little bit. It's one of those beautiful things that, hey, if we are willing to be a little vulnerable and to examine, these kind of systems we all live in on autopilot, we'll all be better off, most likely. You can also probably save a good bit of money too. Yeah. And then free up time and resources to do stuff that is more interesting for everybody. What a real victory.
Yeah, it's been
such
fun.
A cool story.
It's been fun.
One of my favorite things that I've learned about you today that I did not know is that, when you told the story of kind of your formative self and who you saw yourself as today and who you saw yourself as previously having been, you talked about that you were kind of a punk, in the literal sense. You were in the punk scene, you'd be in these shows. And I mean, I find punk very charming. I used to play in a punk band. My wife, used to be into punk stuff. It is a musical and artistic movement that's near and dear to my heart. But that kind of rebelliousness, and that instinct against the status quo, is there a relationship there? Is that something that, are you still a punk at heart, you think? I'm not trying to lead you into an answer, but
that's a great question.
Do you still think of yourself as a punk, but kind of grown up? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I still think of myself that way. Yeah. If you were to ask kids in the pit right now, do I qualify? I might not.
Right.
But I first got into punk music when I was around 13 years old. For me, it was a huge home in a way that I didn't really feel a sense of belonging in other places in my life. So I I grew up like nerdy, picked on, bullied, and then like discovering not just like the music but also the community. I was like, I get to be like completely myself.
Right.
And there's that sort of anti-authoritarianism streak in there that like really speaks to me. And also like I finally have friends. Like I finally have like this like, place. So that carried me for most of high school. Similarly, I played drums. I was in a band. I very much enjoyed.
You're a drummer?
Yeah.
How have I never known this?
I mean, I don't do it right now.
Yeah, but once you learn it,
I
you
have
you
the
don't
drum
forget.
set in my basement in parts, in the little, like all stacked up.
In a surplus, right?
Yes, my surplus drum set. Yeah, like maybe someday, but like I'm super busy right now, travel. It's like not something that like I have time for.
Doesn't
but
sound like you're up to anything cool, important, or interesting.
Yeah. For me, the story was the punk movement was very anti-Bush at the height of the Iraq War, and the end of the Bush era and the start of the Obama era happened while I was in high school.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of public conversation about Iraq and Afghanistan, and also like the sort of competing presidency ideologies of McCain and Obama. And I became enthralled in politics. It just sort of grabbed me at that time.
Yeah.
And I was also very interested in like historical anti-war movements. And so I sort of shifted from being really into and really enjoying spending time in the punk community to shifting to like the activism community.
Yeah.
I like started a group in my high school, started to do like local organizing and protest stuff. I did an internship with New Hampshire Peace Action. Like my early sort of, involvement, my first few jobs were like activist related stuff.
Yeah.
And the punk stuff for me, it was like, there was aspects of the punk culture that bothered me. There was aspects of the machismo, there was aspects of misogyny, and there were times where I felt uncomfortable, and I found that I like, okay, no, like my real home, the place where I really feel comfortable is like in the movement.
Yeah.
It's like in, the spaces with people who are organizing. So I do feel like I've kind of moved away from that culture being a culture that I want to spend time with, I guess.
Right.
There are some bands who, if they're traveling through, I will drop everything and go see them. Like I still go to some shows, but for the most part, it is a thing that most people don't know about me, and it is constantly on my headphones.
Right.
It's like I have not graduated from punk being what I like exclusively listen to.
Yeah.
But most people don't know that.
Well, I'm so lucky that we got you to share it on here.
Yeah.
That's seriously cool. There is something though. I mean, I kind of relate to that. I feel like I knew a lot of people in college who were more interested in, a kind of performative action to try and make the world better, as opposed to really trying to understand a problem seriously and what caused it and what could solve it. And I think that's one of the things that's coolest about, I mean, you're still pretty young in the grand scheme of things. We're about the same age, so I'm comfortable saying that because I want to think of myself as young. But you are such a great example of like, the punk activist who grew up, and like you have this awesome path of just like, let's take this hard thing that we want to solve and then just like keep engaging with it over time. And a lot of people would have given up, like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I like the tenacity of these projects. I think I feel motivated by the puzzle. In my early activism, I was in high school. There was a board meeting I went to for New Hampshire Peace Action. This is a really timely story, actually, because this was it was a moment where Israel was bombing Gaza, and this was like, let's say 2010, 2011. There was a, if you look it up online, there was some like little war that occurred in 2011 or whatever. And so the Peace Action group was very passionately talking about this.
Right.
And there was, lots of desire to speak out and talk about, but obviously, as always, and things are much more polarized right now than they were back then. But like, there was a sort of a back and forth conversation about like also wanting to make sure that we talk about anti-Semitism and that we're, that we have a balance in the way that we sort of message and approach a protest or whatever.
Yeah.
There's this guy, I'm not going to say his name, but he was very old. He was like pushing 90 years old. He'd been an activist for a long time. He'd been arrested many, many, many times. And he gets up because it's too late. He needs to go home he needs to leave this meeting.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, I trust you all will come to a solution. I love you all. Thank you all for doing all of this. My 2 cents, I appreciate everyone's sort of like, passion that you bring to the space and the things that, really bother you about the various like injustices that are happening. Me, I just hate letting the bastards get away with it. And he walks out. And that phrase has really stuck with me. I just hate letting the bastards get away with it.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great way to like summarize. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
That's like, I know I'm working on waste and it's
Right.
like hard to think of it that, but like, that's it. Like I am frustrated by the fact that there are people in this world who are receiving immense amounts of profit off of incredibly unsustainable, unjust, pollutive, extractive, exploitative systems, and I hate letting those bastards get away with it. And for me, I think working on systems that like fundamentally like cut those those systems off like at the heels, like create the structure to make it so that disposable items are not purchased. Items are valued for their reuse value. There is infrastructure and jobs around reuse and repair and refurbishment and recovery. There are people who spend their days working in soil, composting stuff. Like you are cutting off the money going to the companies making the disposable stuff by not buying it anymore, and you're cutting off the money going to the companies that are making immense amounts of money not doing a good job managing our waste with landfills and incineration, and you are keeping those resources local. And like I think like figuring out how to like sort of build those sustainable systems to me is a method of not letting the bastards get away with it. So that's
Well, and what a refreshing thing too. I mean, no, seriously, another guest, my wife's name is Jess. Another guest I had on here, Jules Good.
Yeah,
Jules.
Jules.
Yeah, they're the best. We had a similar conversation, right, about kind of identity politics and, what's useful about it, what can not be useful about it. And, I relate, and I've known a lot of people who I think could relate, to maybe what that older gentleman was feeling, the activist, of like, hey, look, the passion that you bring to this is great. And, you are younger than me and thinking about all these issues in ways that, me and my generation maybe never did. But there is an upper limit to which, defining a problem or the ism, right, to use a parlance, is useful, right? And it actually accomplishes something. And it's, it's a super complicated issue, but that greater mentality of whatever thing you're working on, not missing the forest for the trees, like what really are we trying to do? Are we doing it, et cetera, et cetera? And I don't know, that's a thing that I see a lot of activists grapple with.
Yeah.
And it's important, right? Because like language is everything. Language is who we include, who we exclude. I understand, but words, talk is cheap too. It cuts both ways, and I think you do a good job of balancing those things, right? I've been in your website. I've known you for a while. I know your organization and their work, and it's incredible stuff. And you are as versed in the nuances of any particular, equity, justice, sustainable environmental issue that a person could ever be in. But you're also so laser focused on actually, getting shit done, right? You're not letting the bastards get away with it. And I think that's great. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen by accident.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I don't know that I would claim the as knowledgeable as anyone badge, but
sure.
Yeah, no, I try.
I gave it to you, and I decide. On this podcast, I decide. What makes you optimistic about the future of your work? And you've already given me a dozen different things, by the way. Like if you,
yeah, I
this
mean, I
is a
think just like
stupid question.
fundamentally, it's I believe that it's possible. I don't know. I'm like constantly frustrated by the limitations and the complexity and the bureaucracy, and also like fascinated, and like the motivation doesn't seem to go away. I'm like, oh man, that is so annoying. I'm gonna fix that. Like it's I don't know. It's
You can't not do it.
yeah, you can't not do it. That's a good way to put it. It's hard to look away. I know too much.
Yeah.
I see too much potential for what could be.
Right.
And I see the areas where things are failing, and I'm like, we can fix that.
Yeah. And what could be is so beautiful,
Yeah.
What's some advice that you would give a young activist today? Whether it's in this niche issue or something else.
So we, as an organization, often use a framework that it's like a theory of change. And so there's a lot of theories of change. Like there are books that you can read that go over, 20 different examples of theories of change. So I don't want to claim this as ours. We pulled this from a resource called Beautiful Trouble, which is a book on theories and practices. But the theory is called the points of intervention theory. And the idea behind the points of intervention theory is many of us are sort of driven by or passionate by a particular problem. And if you look at that problem, you probably could zoom out to a larger system and see how that problem is one component of a much larger equation. So to use waste as an example, because it's one that I'm very familiar with, waste is the end of what we would refer to as the linear consumption economy. So the entire global supply chain, of which waste is the end point of the system. And within that linear consumption economy, things get really, really complicated. The linear consumption economy starts with extraction. We extract products. We produce often disposable goods. We distribute them around the world. We package them. We consume them, often very quickly, and we dispose of them, often very quickly. And then we go back to the linear side of square one, and we extract resources again. That's the linear system. To fix that system, and there are many systems that are broken, right? Like linear consumption economy is not the only broken system. But to fix, let's say, politics could be another broken system.
Sure.
If you wanted to care, we could do a whole walkthrough of what is wrong with the oligarchic system of governance in the United States, right? So if you want to fix the linear consumption economy, which is a very unsustainable, unjust system, I can't do it, you can't do it, all the people who you've met in your entire life, all together in one room, could not do it.
Yeah.
You need everyone working on pieces of that to fix it. And so I think that what we try to communicate to young folks is the idea that, yes, totally hear you. The world is broken and things are overwhelming. It is hard to figure out how to get past that moment of overwhelm. Our recommendation is acknowledge, sort of let's all agree that none of us can fix it. It's not fixable by one person. That being the baseline, what is it of that system that is the sort of intersection between like your skill set and your passion? How can you use that skill set and passion to peel back the tiniest splinter of that massive pipeline? So like if your skill set passion intersection is law and you want to get involved in environmental law, you're participating in an intervention of that system. If you want to design sustainable products and packaging, then there's an intervention point. If you want to get involved in resisting new oil and gas pipelines, and you want to go lock yourself to a pipeline, spend the next 6 months in jail, like you are intervening in that system. If you like, there's so many ways you could start an organic farm. You could learn how to build wind turbines. You could, start a thrift store. You could get involved in composting. It doesn't matter what you choose.
Please don't start a podcast, though. For the love of God.
We need everyone not doing the same thing.
Yeah. We
need everyone doing something. The phrase we use is nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something.
Yeah.
Right. And like what we need is people to just be comfortable living in the sort of disparate unknown of we're all collaboratively working non-collaboratively towards solutions. Like there is, all of us are doing these things, even though it doesn't feel like all of us are doing these. Like we don't feel like we're all in solidarity with each other.
Right.
But like really, like the folks who are out there shutting down pipelines and in municipal meetings, like fighting the next landfill, are doing that alongside like the person running a thrift store and the person doing a compost facility and the person like installing solar panels. Like actually all of those things are connected, and I think we don't see it that way very often.
Yeah.
So I think for me the answer is like, don't try not to be overwhelmed by feeling like you have to like fix the world. Just figure out what it is that is like your particular thing that you're like, I can do that.
Yeah.
And know that that's enough.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Lesson 1, you won't do it alone.
Yeah.
You have to do it together or not at all, right? It won't get done.
Yeah.
That's the best. That's it. That's fantastic. Well, I feel the same way. And how lucky am I to get to talk to you and all the other folks, coming on here. And I might probably cut this out, but that really is, you just spoke a little bit to my motivation for wanting to bring some of these folks together. There is a cohesiveness to all of these wonderful people that I personally know and all the people that they know, and they're doing such incredible work. And you're not going to see it on, no shade to WMUR, but you're not going to see it on WMUR.
Yeah.
Certainly not on CNN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So if you didn't, put a little effort in, you'd never even know it was happening. You'd never know. And I think that sucks.
Yeah.
I think it's better to highlight it, to celebrate it, to share it, to get involved. And you are at the intersection of all these things and all these people. And you're one of my favorite people, and it's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
It is fun. Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Recording space was provided by Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.